What's up, you guys? Sean Ross Sapp, managing editor, Fightful.com, FightfulMMA.com. Head over, check us out. We've got all your MMA news, podcasts, photos, videos. You know the drill. We have a lot of extra bonus content over at FightfulSelect.com if you'd like to support us in that way. But hey, the best way to do that, FightfulMMA.com. Click that exclusives tab. You will see lots of interviews from the man I am joined by tonight, one James Lynch. James, how are you?
I'm doing well, man. What a great card that was. A little late, but nonetheless, it was very good to watch some high level talent there. And what about the Moose, man? He came through.
Yeah, but besides the pace of this show, I think this is a very good show. I thought it was a lot of fun. I'm not going to pretend like I am a huge proponent of the Lima Koreshkov fight, but my God, you know what? Altogether, this was a good show. It was a nice first effort for DAZN. James, be honest, what did you think the name of the network was the first time you saw it?
DAZN or DAZN, I don't know, something like that, or Mac Danzig, I'm not sure.
I called it DAZN.
DAZN,
I thought it was DAZN. Somebody said it could be DAZN. I don't think so. On the prelims of this Bellator 206 show that we're about to talk about, mainly the only two fights really worth mentioning. Adam Piccolotti picked up a win, his second in a row after dropping two in a row. He was a guy who was undefeated just a couple of years ago, has bounced back. And then you have Arlene Blencow, who is she's been around Bellator for a while. She took a bit of 2017 off, but after losing her title fight last year, she has kind of gotten back to form, won with a slam tonight. So those are maybe a couple names worth watching. But this show as a whole, what did you think, James?
I mean, I agree with you. Other than the pacing, I thought the show was really well done. The prelims were pretty good. I mean, I'll admit a few of them I might have skipped over, but the Amber Leibrock and Blencow fight was interesting. You always like seeing a finish in women's fights. The Piccolotti Terry fight was great. A lot of history there going into that one. Of course, Terry used to train at AKA. That's where Piccolotti trains now. Piccolotti's a good prospect for them, man. I don't know why this fight was not on the main card. I think they wanted to push Kerry Melendez and, that Gaston Bolanos guy as well. So, it's a shame that they didn't get the spotlight on this one because Piccolotti, I think, is quite the talent. But prelims were, what you expect, just a lot of local talent. Too many fights, though, I think. They got to cut back on those. I don't know why there were so many. Get that going a little bit earlier. But that's pretty much it. I mean, Piccolotti did what he did. I don't think anyone was surprised to see him get a decision over James Terry, who, Terry's looked good, but, you got to beat prospects like this. And Piccolotti just proved that he's, a solid guy in either the welterweight or lightweight division.
If anybody ever watches the Fightful MMA podcast, Tuesdays, 2 p.m. Eastern, FightfulMMA.com, podcast platforms everywhere. I often talked really over the last 2 years about how despite Bellator's depth that they have, and they have enough to put on decent shows for all the cards that they have. You would see a lot of shows, quite frankly, as recently as the last one. I mean, I like Lovato and I like AJ McKee. I like Patricky Pitbull just fine. Nobody knows who the hell they are. Nobody, besides people that are covering the sport. That's not the type of show they need to put on. Tonight was the type of show they needed to put on. They had a real attraction at the top, a super fight in Mousasi versus MacDonald. You had a couple of legends, Rampage, Wanderlei. You had a high-level tournament match in Lima and Koreshkov. You had a prospect in Aaron Pico. And you're going to see cards that Bellator puts on that are a little closer to this. Not next week, on the 12th, they have Mitrione Bader, Nelson and Haratonov, Kimbo Slice's son. Then you have Lorenz Larkin and Eric Silva. That's a decent show, in my opinion. Then you have Fedor Sonnen. You have Shlemenko and Tokov. You have Henderson and Syed Awad, Czech Congo, Tim Johnson. All the way through, really, the end of the year, I think they've got some decent shows. And this was a nice way to kick that off. And like I mentioned, James, as a site that covers pro wrestling, MMA, and boxing, after wrestling really having the attention all year, I can tell you that has fallen off of a cliff since the beginning of September. And MMA and boxing are really reemerging. And you got a lot of great stuff. You got John Jones back. You've got good Bellator shows. You got Chuck Liddell and Tito Ortiz fighting this year. Conor McGregor's back. Nate Diaz is back. Lots of stuff. And that's just scratching the surface. You got Wilder and Fury maybe fighting. You got Pacquiao and Mayweather maybe fighting. They're really picking up things, and combat sports is taking center stage. And tonight, Bellator did. As you mentioned, Gaston Bolanos got a win over Gutierrez. opening up the night. Second round, TKO. Kerry Melendez also defeated Dakota Zimmerman. Melendez was very lucky that things didn't end up worse for her in that first round, I thought, because whether it be from the elbows from the bottom from Zimmerman, the triangle, the armbar, the triangle armbar, like Melendez was able to persevere. How did you score this fight?
I scored it for Melendez, but you're right. It wasn't a cakewalk like I think Bellator was expecting here. Zimmerman making her pro debut. I think part of that too is the weight cut. I mean, Melendez fighting at strawweight for this matchup. I don't really know the strategy there because that's not really a division that Bellator is focusing on at this point. 125 is sort of, their bread and butter, and 145 I suppose as well too. But yeah, Melendez pulls it off. I think that's all that matters. She has that last name. She has that name value. Who knows what they're going to do with her? I mean, there's obviously a long history there with Gilbert Melendez and Scott Coker. So, I think it added a little bit of variety to the card, but I don't think this was the result they wanted. The result was what they got in terms of her winning, but I think they were expecting more of a dominant performance.
Well, I know a result that they sure as hell wanted. Aaron Pico.
Oh, yeah.
Winning his 4th straight fight. I've got a lot of praise to heap on Aaron Pico because, I've mentioned this on the podcast. Last year when Zach Freeman beat him, you were the only guy Freeman would talk to because you're the only guy that would talk to Freeman. And a lot of guys in Aaron Pico's position would have been like, you know what? MMA's not for me. I'm going to go coach wrestling somewhere, whatever, hang it up, not do it again. Not Aaron Pico. He was back in 2 months and he won. And then he was back in, I think, 3 months and he beat a guy in Shane Crutchton who was a lot of people don't know him. He's been around. He's a solid fighter. Then he came back like 4 months later, won a fight. And then, Leandro Higo competed for the Bellator championship. I mean, he is the amount of experience this guy has at 23 fights. It's not somebody that usually Bellator, you would think that they would throw in there. They're not bringing up a lot of their guys like this where they're like, hey, I know you got knocked out 14 months ago, Aaron, so we're going to put you in there against a former title challenger. But he did it.
Yeah, I was going to say, sorry to interrupt you there. It was very impressive to see what he did here. I think, I predicted that the odds would be in Pico's favor heading into this fight just because of the hype. But really, Leandro Higo, I mean, this is a legit guy. He's got wins over Steven Peterson, Terrion Ware, both guys who were in the UFC. Well, Ware probably not at this point, but still very impressive wins. And he fought for the title twice, actually. He fought Dantes in his debut for the title, missed weight in that one. Didn't end up being, he couldn't have won the title, but it was still for the title before that. And then he fought Caldwell as well. This was one of those interesting strategies by Bellator because, Higo, very talented, but he has been very inconsistent in Bellator, and it paid off. Pico looked amazing. This fight, in my opinion, should have been stopped a little bit sooner, but nonetheless, Pico goes out there, gets another highlight reel finish. This is the best case scenario, and here's the crazy thing, Sean. This kid is only 22 years old. The future is so bright. And he trains with AJ McKee. I mean, if you want to look at one of the, I've given Bellator a lot of crap about them not building up their prospects. They've done a fantastic job with AJ McKee, who got that highlight reel finish last week to his teammate, Aaron Pico, tonight.
They got a few that are looking real good. Ed Ruth, looking real good. Tyrell Fortune, looking real good. Aaron Pico, also looking real good. MVP is a guy that maybe they brought up too slow, but they at times, they can hit it big with these guys. Sometimes they wait too long, like in the case of MVP, but not Aaron Pico. If anything, I was surprised that they gave him a fighter of this caliber at this point of his career. And as you mentioned, not just 22, James, a fresh 22. He just turned 22 last week.
Yeah.
So, and he's sitting here saying in 2 or 3 years, nobody will be able to touch me. And I'm like, I'm scared to think of where he'll be in 2 or 3 years, because right now I'm looking at things and I'm like, do they give him a title fight right now? He debuted in MMA last year. He is 22, but if they gave him a title fight next, I would go, yeah, I guess that makes sense. Why not?
Well, here's the interesting thing, because him and McKee are in the same division, so I don't know how that's going to work out at some point. McKee's another guy who, he just beat Muchapa or Teixeira or whatever his name is now, that was a guy as well who had some pretty notable fights as well. So really, I think either of them are right up there. What do? Do you give him a Daniel Weichel at this point? I mean, really, it's tough to say. The Higo win certainly looks impressive. Now, we should mention Higo coming up from 35, so that does play a little bit. It's not like his regular division, but nonetheless, I think a Pat Kern fight would be very interesting right now.
I think that's a good one. This division, I've made a lot of the fact that it recycles an awful lot, and that's got to change. It's a lot like the UFC bantamweight division. It's time to move on, and for better or for worse, it just looks like Daniel Strauss is just, who knows what his future in MMA will be, but we have to have something new. We got to have something different, and Aaron Pico is that something different, at least as of right now. And you have Pitbull taking on Emmanuel Sanchez, so you never know how that will go from featherweight on. But man, there are so many good fighters, so many good fighters that Bellator has either brought up or adopted, so to speak, and got a hold of before the UFC could. And now the UFC, I think, with Tough taking a backseat to Dana White's Contender Series, some of these guys that maybe UFC is gun shy on, they're not going to be as gun shy to put them on a Dana White's Contender Series. But there are a lot of really good names at featherweight right now. So, I mean, if he doesn't get a title shot, that's fine. But I can imagine, it wouldn't surprise me if they were like, let's go on and do it. Although I think that might be a little too much for him. This was a great win. This was a big win for him. But there's enough in that top 5 where you don't have to shoehorn him into that situation. But man, he looks the part in the cage, and like I said, man, people, I don't think anybody really wrote him off after his Freeman loss necessarily. There was a lot of, hey, he's new, and maybe that definitely wasn't the right opponent for him. James, Zach Freeman had 10 fights,
yeah,
and that's dangerous no matter what. So Aaron Pico delivering big time. And not only that, 4 first-round TKOs out of a freestyle wrestler. That's fantastic. That's good news.
That's how you build a star. That's absolutely how you do it. You get a guy who does that, and then he's well spoken, and he's got good people around him. Because not only does he train with AJ McKee at the Body Shop, he also is part of that super camp with TJ Dillashaw and Juan Archuleta and Jake Ellenberger. There's a lot of really good talent around him. He's basically doing everything right that he needs to do. And I think if Bellator is smart, which they are, they're giving him the right fights now. And also that Freeman fight we should mention was at lightweight, so him finding the right division right now is a big thing too. I think just overall they have a really, I mean, this is a guy now that people know from this card. I mean, assuming that people got the DAZN free preview like I did and everyone else, but it's one of those things where they can use him on a big card now because he has enough highlights now that you could easily get people to tune in. I'm intrigued for his next fight regardless of who it's against.
And I mentioned Ed Ruth. He's another guy that just finishes people. He's got one decision win, and he's fought at I think 192, 195. He fought at 189 in a catch weight, 175 until he settled at welterweight. Now they have him in the tournament. They have him in the title tournament. And Tyrell Fortune hasn't finished all of his fights. I think maybe about half, a little bit more. So they're finding great success. Let me ask you, James, does DAZN have Peppa the Pig on the schedule?
Yeah, what a blunder. I mean, these UK fans, I feel for them. Not only do they have to watch MMA at ridiculous times of the hour, but they also, they can't watch Bellator. And the one time they do, the main event's showing Pippa the Pig. What's going on? I mean, now listen, I got to explain something for people who don't know. That is on, so that is not necessarily on Bellator. That's on the network. I've worked in television. That's on them. So I'm sure there's going to be some angry emails from the PR people at Bellator. But man, I feel for these UK fans. They just can't get it right for Bellator for whatever reason.
I'm not as sympathetic towards international fans right now because the morning of UFC 229, I got to wake up at 5 a.m. and cover WWE Super Showdown. So make sure you guys tune in. I'm doing a live post show right after that from Australia. They'll be from Australia, not me. But, of course, we will be back for a UFC 229 post show podcast. James Lynch will be in town for that show. So make sure you all follow along with him as well. But this Bellator show kept on rolling. Douglas Lima defeated Andre Koreshkov. These two, I think, have fought 13 rounds overall. Douglas Lima got it done, just chipped away and chipped away and chipped away, and apologized after the fight, saying that it wasn't quite as exciting as he would have hoped. But given what happened to Rory MacDonald later, this seemed to be a brilliant game plan.
Yeah, it was. I mean, at the end of the day, you got the finish. I mean, that's all you want on the resume. People weren't obviously too happy with some of the grappling exchanges that took place or the holding against the cage, but Lima got it done. This guy is, Chael Sonnen said it on the broadcast. I agree with him. This guy is one of the most underappreciated welterweight fighters around. That fight with Rory could have gone either way. He's still a top fighter. Getting a finish looks good, and not taking barely any damage. I mean, that's going to help him in this tournament. And who knows when Rory's going to be able to fight? It could be forever with that nose now. So we'll see what happens there. That's why they have those alternate bouts for Rory's nose.
Yeah, the Amasau versus Larkin fight is an alternate fight and a damn good fight too. Amasau being able to do what he did to Gerald Harris was very impressive. For Koreshkov, he has dropped 2 fights in the rubber match, and he got put away in the 5th round. But we mentioned Rory, and we'll talk more about Rory later, of course. But Lima right now, how do you put his odds in this tournament?
I think they're very good. I think he is probably the best guy in this tournament outside of Rory. Now, it just depends on what type of shape we're going to see Rory in at this point. That's what I love about tournaments. Anything can happen. But if I'm a betting man, I have to think Lima's the favorite here. I mean, he went toe-to-toe with the champ. He's given Rory his toughest test probably since he lost to Stephen Thompson in the UFC. To me, this was a good win. I know it wasn't as flashy as people would have liked, but you get a finish over Andrei Koreshkov, a guy who doesn't get finished much in his career. Just 3 losses in his career total, 2 to Lima, 1 to Ben Askren. That's an impressive performance, in my opinion.
Where does Koreshkov go from here? Because as you mentioned, he's been beaten twice by Lima, once by Askren forever ago. Who knows if Askren will ever fight again? But he is a former Bellator welterweight champion. He does have a win over Lima, although it's just one. He has a win over Ben Henderson, a much undersized Ben Henderson, but still looks good on the resume nonetheless. Where does he go from here? Do you think they match him up with another person who loses in this tournament?
Yeah, I think they're going to give him someone that he can get a highlight reel finish on, because this, in my opinion, dropped his stock big time. I mean, he didn't look great in this fight. I think that this was the type of performance that isn't going to make you want to come back. And the other thing we have to remember with Koreshkov too, doesn't speak much English. He's not really the Spike the Paramount Network mold that they sort of like in Bellator. So you would hope they're going to give him something else, or they might just give him someone to ride out his contract, because I know he's not been happy with the promotion. We'll see what happens, but definitely Koreshkov's stock went down tonight.
Well, UFC would probably love to get a hold of him and really enhance their Russian talent. And Bellator used to be all on the Russian talent. We used to see just swarms. I really, they not thought they were ahead of the curve. Yeah. That has definitely changed. It's not the same anymore. You don't see Minakov, Ivanov, Volkov, Frodo Kospolayev, a lot of these guys who came from Europe and made Bellator their home anymore. That's just not Bellator's MO. They've got a different model now. The tournament format really benefited a lot of those guys. And even though this is a tournament format, definitely didn't benefit Koreshkov tonight. The winner of this will face, or Douglas Lima will face the winner of Paul Daly MVP. Who do you see emerging victorious in the MVP Paul Daly fight?
That's a tough one, because MVP, as good as he's looked, I mean, he's had some fights where he's been exposed a little bit. When he fought Fernando Gonzalez, I mean, he got the win, but that really wasn't a great fight. And, he can, believe it or not, we can see a boring Michael Page fight like we saw in that fight with Gonzalez. To me, I think right now, I think you have to favor Page in that fight against Daly. I mean, Daly does have that win over Lawrence Larkin, which looks great on the resume, but I would slightly favor Page in that one. And I kind of hope we see Page and Lima just from a style standpoint. I mean, Daly is obviously exciting too with his stand-up, but just you get a guy who can throw kicks like Lima, like Page, that's fireworks. I think you really can't go wrong, but if I'm making a pick, I'm going to go Michael Page.
Yeah, I am too. I think that Page is able to get it done, and they're going to fight the kind of fight that each other want. And that's important too. I like Bellator's method of putting the fights that they want to put on in the first round. You're not trying to set up fights like that. Also involved in this tournament, MacDonald and Fitch, as we mentioned earlier, Neiman Gracie and Ed Ruth, and then Larkin and Amasau on the other side of things. Speaking of the other side of things, no longer does Wanderlei Silva hold an advantage. Quinton Rampage Jackson tied things up 2-2. It looked like a couple of dads fighting at the swimming pool, James. This was not 2004. That's for damn sure. But Quinton Rampage Jackson finished Wanderlei Silva in the second round. What did you think of this? It was chuck and duck. Wanderlei Silva, quite frankly, was running a little bit in the first round. Not the Wanderlei that we know and love. He wasn't exactly windmilling punches. He was not in shape. But, I mean, these are two old guys, James.
This fight was actually better than I expected it was going to be. I thought we were going to see just a typical, from what we've seen with Rampage lately anyways, is just a typical boring decision. But Rampage still has power. I mean, I got to give him credit here. He was able to land a couple times on Wanderlei Silva, and Silva just is nowhere close to the fighter he used to be. I think that's pretty obvious, as far as what we saw in the UFC and Pride as opposed to what we're seeing now. And Rampage still has power. That was the saving grace in this fight, and he ended up getting the finish. This was a good result for Bellator, in my opinion, because I thought this was going to be pretty boring, and it actually was pretty not out of my seat exciting, but it still held my attention. I'm not going to open up another tab type thing on my computer.
I was interested. That's the thing. I was interested, and that was the point of this fight. This fight was one of the things, as much as I was excited for Mousasi and MacDonald, this was a hell of a complimentary piece to put on this show. I've mentioned before, I saw a best of Pride pay-per-view on DirecTV, I think in 2004. And I saw a guy just power bombing people and body slamming people. And I was a big pro wrestling fan. And on that same, it was Quinton Rampage Jackson. And on that same pay-per-view, I saw Kevin Randleman German suplex Fedor on top of his head. And these two guys doing pro wrestling moves made me a fan of MMA. And I remember before I covered MMA, I flipped out. Rampage Jackson winning the UFC light heavyweight title. Won a bit of money on that from some friends, too, that were on the Chuck Liddell train. And being a Quinton Rampage Jackson fan, before I got into media, which, I mean, to be honest with you, he'd say lots of things that would make you not a fan, but he was almost larger than life for a while. He got into movies. That wasn't good. He was really funny. He was entertaining. He had the entrance. He had the chain and all that stuff. And it's kind of wild to still see him fighting, but make no mistake, him fighting at this weight is his dream, James. He has always wanted to be like this. He has always wanted to fight just and not do any cardio. This is what Rampage Jackson wants.
Yeah, do you remember that story about, I don't know if you heard that on the Joe Rogan podcast ages ago when Mike Dolce was working with Rampage and he was trying to get him down to weight. Rampage wasn't losing any weight. And then Dolce went in his bed. This was when they were in the UK and they found all these chocolate bar wrappers in there. So this is Rampage just getting to eat as much chocolate as he can. It's good. The fact that he still has knockout power is going to get him fights and get people interested. It's clearly not the Rampage we saw in the UFC, but hey, I want to see him fight now because this, added a little bit of life to him.
And what I want to see him fight is people like Wanderlei Silva or other strikers. I don't know what the hell Bellator was thinking, putting him with Chael Sonnen, King Mo again. That was a bad idea. Satoshi Ishii, why did they think that was going to be a good idea? It wasn't. It was a miserable idea. I think we learned that long ago, that if you put Rampage Jackson in there with a grappler, he's got good enough defensive wrestling. Eventually, he's going to get taken down. It's going to be a boring fight. Then he's going to complain about it afterwards. You're going to kill a lot of his buzz. You're going to make him not as exciting because even after his first two fights he had in Bellator, I mean the Beltran and Impumbu fights, there was a little bit of buzz about him, and that's why they booked the King Mo fight, because it seemed like a good, plausible fight. But anybody who knew anything knew that fight was not going to be good. And that's the fight that they wanted so bad in that tournament final. And they got it. But, man, just not the right one. And it was 4.5 years since Rampage's last finish. He got one tonight. As you mentioned, that power's not going away. And especially with him adding on that extra weight that he wanted so bad, he still got it. So that was a fun watch, despite some of it was sad, but it was fun, man. It was just fun. Main event time, Rory MacDonald, who once fought BJ Penn, who has competed at featherweight, was defeated by Gegard Mousasi, who has wins at heavyweight over Mark Hunt and Gary Goodridge. It was not hard for Gegard Mousasi. He employed the jab just perfectly in the first round. Rory had to shoot in the second round, did not work, got stuffed immediately, turned on his back. pounded out for the win. Mousasi emerges victorious. And that size advantage made a big difference for Mousasi, who, as I've mentioned, quite frankly, would be one of the best 205-pound fighters in the world if he wanted to be.
I agree, and people forget Mousasi was supposed to make his UFC debut against Alexander Gustafsson. So just think about if Gustafsson ever had to fight Rory, how crazy that would be. But yeah, I mean, just this was a dominant performance from Mousasi. I'm happy as someone who's taking off the journalism hat for a second here. Someone who's been a fan of Mousasi dating back to the Dream days. This was great. It was awesome to see him have the spotlight on him, get a main event like this, and also shut up the people who were really hard on him for the Shlemenko fight, which I know could have gone either way. But it's good to see him, thriving in Bellator after the UFC really didn't give him, a fair shake, in my opinion. So it's good to see him get this here. For Rory, I see a lot of people on social media right now, a lot of doom and gloom saying Rory will never be the same, all this stuff. Look, Rory's been beat up before. He lost, he was basically, 2% level on doom when he fought Robbie Lawler, and he still managed to win the Bellator welterweight title. So to me, I think he'll be back. I know he's getting up there in age, but it certainly screws up the tournament a little bit if he isn't able to fight. But I think this was it just showed that, look, stay in your lane. Rory's got to stay at welterweight. And for Gegard, he is a top middleweight. And I had that tweet out there tonight. A little sad that we're not going to ever see him fight, Robert Whittaker, Calvin Gastelum, Luke Rockhold, Yoel Romero, guys like that, because he is really one of the top middleweights in the world, if not the top middleweight. And
as I mentioned, he could compete, has competed as one of the better light heavyweights as well. To be honest with you, when the Rumble, I can't remember if it was Rumble and Jones or Rumble and Cormier that fell out. It should have been Mousasi and Rumble, but I think that Rumble probably had it in his head that he was fighting one more time anyway and was like, no, I'm going to wait. And Mousasi very well could have won that fight and been the UFC light heavyweight champion, even if it wasn't for the interim. And I would not be shocked at all to see Mousasi move up and fight Ryan Bader in the future after the Bellator heavyweight title situation is all settled. But they've got that ability. They've got some guys that they can put in these super fight situations. And I like that Bellator is not hesitant to move up a Rory MacDonald. They're not hesitant to move up Chael Sonnen in 2 weight classes or say, Rampage, fight at heavyweight, whatever. Ryan Bader, we don't have the richest light heavyweight division. You move up to heavyweight. So for Mousasi, this was a big fight. And for MacDonald, it was a big fight. And for Bellator, one of the highest level fights as far as talent in the cage at the same time as things go, as we see. MacDonald a bit overmatched, but on paper, this fight looked a lot better than it ended up being. MacDonald, we talked about how he's in that Bellator welterweight tournament. What kind of timetable you think we're looking at just from a purely speculatory standpoint?
I don't know. I mean, the last time he broke his nose, he was out for a while. I'm no doctor, clearly, but it's one of those things where, maybe they should just scrap him in the tournament and just say, you know what, fight the winner. Let's not have the belt move around, change the rules. You might have to do that because I don't think he's going to be in there, and you need him in there because he's the champion right now. So maybe they alter the rules due to Rory's nose. We have decided that whoever wins this tournament will fight him in the end or something. I don't know. But either way, it's going to delay things. Maybe they do it like the Showtime Super 6 where it takes like 5 years to finish the tournament, like they did in boxing years ago with the middleweights. One of those things where they just delay the result because they have to wait for Rory to come back. I don't know what they're going to do. That is the only sort of downside of this is we don't know a timetable as to when he's going to come back. But to me, this was actually a good situation for Gegard because really it just buys time. He's got 2 fights at middleweight that I see, and he talked about them tonight. Lovato Jr., which I'm actually very intrigued by. Lovato Jr. undefeated. And you've got the Machida rematch. Assuming Machida beats Carvalho, let's hope he does because I don't think we need to see another fight against Mousasi and Carvalho. It went very much in Mousasi's favor in that one. But that's it. I mean, there's no other middleweights that really stand out as far as competition for his title because if I'm Gegard, I get both those fights and then I head up to light heavyweight and possibly heavyweight and then call it a day.
Yeah, so let's break that down a little bit. The Carvalho Machida fight, I tell you what, I don't look forward to seeing any Machida fight. Never, ever. I think Carvalho probably beats him. And Mousasi says, I'm not waiting 6 months to fight Machida. Give me Lovato. Do you think Lovato is the right move? Because obviously Carvalho is the only guy I see above him. Salter's in the mix, but he got beat by Lovato. So it's like I don't think you're going to have him fight the winner of Manhoof and Chidi Njokuani. So Lovato's the only guy that really makes sense to me.
And it's an interesting matchup. You look at the majority of Gegard Mousasi's losses in his career, they've been by submission. I know some of them were ages ago. I mean, you look at his very first loss against Petrius Markavicius back in 2005. It was a submission loss. Obviously a much different fighter than what we saw back then. But the point is that we don't know how he is on the ground. Jacare, remember, he dominated him in the rematch in the UFC. Yeah. Jacare completely manhandled him and got the submission win there. So, you know, it is intriguing. Lovato has made everyone look amateur that's fought him, especially on the ground. So, you know, it's an intriguing matchup. You've got the second, if he's able to get it there, then it you know, could be a totally different story. Now, saying that, look at Gegard tonight, stuffing the takedowns. I mean, people were still talking about this heading into this fight. Oh, can he stop the takedown? Because the King Mo fight from like ages ago, you know, he's obviously fixed that. So we'll see. It's an intriguing matchup. I know it's not the sexiest, you know, name matchup that they could put together, but I'm intrigued knowing both fighters very well.
If and when we see Gegard Mousasi move up to light heavyweight, it's pretty wide open. You got Phil Davis up there. He's a threat to anybody. He really is. Linton Vassell can be, depending on what night it is, he can be very good. Other than that, boy, it is wide open.
Well, and Vassell actually moved up to heavyweight. He's not in light heavyweight anymore, so you can take him out of the equation. He announced that, I think, like a month ago or something. But it just but just
slim pickings, man.
It is slim pickings. Yeah, I mean, 205's you know, barren wasteland, not just in Bellator, but in the UFC as well. It's just one of those divisions that's really taken a downward spiral. So at this point, yeah, why not? I think you'll see a couple. I think Carvalho's another guy that might move up too. He cuts a lot of weight to get to 85. We could see him at 205 as well as soon too.
I don't know that Bellator right now at this moment has. I think they have maybe 10 light heavyweights, if you count Feijiao, who earned a contract last year and never fought.
I know. Yeah. Who knows what's going on with that?
Yeah, I think they've got Sakara. They've got Phil Davis, Liam McGeary, who is not at his best. They got Nimkov, Fortune. I don't know if Wanderlei is going to, I don't think he's going to fight back there again. And they have a couple of guys that nobody knows about. Other than that, man, wide open for Mousasi. But I think that Mousasi and Phil Davis, Mousasi and Ryan Bader are legit fights that you can book at the top of Bellator shows. I would love to see Mousasi fight either one of those guys. That would be fantastic. But all things considered, what kind of interest did this Bellator show give you for the service, DAZN?
To sum up, man, it was good for me up here in Canada. I enjoyed it. I didn't have any issues. I saw people saying they had buffering issues. I didn't have any. Crystal clear stream. That's all I asked for. Look, we don't ask for much these days, you know, when it comes to the apps. Just a nice stream quality. I like the ability to go back and forth. You know, I went to the bathroom. I missed one of the, you know, part of one of the fights. So I had to go back and scrub through it. That's all I need. I mean, you know, and DVR stuff would be good too. But hey, we're just, you know, starting this off, which I'm fine with. But I was happy with it. Is this something I'm going to continue to pay for? I don't know. I mean, they don't have all the Bellator cards. It would be good if they just, you know, made a deal where they're like, hey, you can either watch Paramount or you can watch it on here. I'd be fine with that as someone who, you know, doesn't watch a lot of cable. So, you know, we'll see. But yeah, as far as doing this for every event, I don't have to pay anything for this one. Am I going to fork out $20 a month? Am I a big MLB fan? Not so much. Am I a big, you know, college football fan or whatever else they stream? Not so much. So yeah. It's really not speaking to my demographic, so to speak.
So I believe the next show that they air is Manhoof and Inja Kawani, I think. Mm-hmm. I could be wrong, and that's the only fight announced for that. First off, right, yeah. One of their Thackerville shows. But then they have McFarlane and Letourneau. That is supported by Neiman Gracie and Ed Ruth. That's a decent fight, tournament fight. Machida and Carvalho, by all means, probably a title eliminator, maybe. King Mo and Liam McGeary, a couple familiar names, former champs. But in the meantime, you have their golden boy, Pitbull. Anybody with the name Pitbull is a golden boy of Bellator. Phil Davis on one show. You've got the Fedor Sonnen show. You've got the Mitrione Bader show. Those are on Paramount. And ultimately, Bellator is owned by Viacom. So, I mean, they got to protect that as well and put on interesting fights there. Do you think that this card, as high profile as it was, not to say it was, but for Bellator it was, do you think this was almost sort of akin to UFC's introductory offer on Fox where they threw Dos Santos and Kane on there and they're like, hey, here we are. But now we see what they put on there.
Yeah, I think they just saw what the UFC was doing with Fight Pass, and they're like, we need something to, counter this. And to me, this is not as good of a service as Fight Pass in the sense that, you're getting other sports. Now, I know Combate Americas is on there. I heard something today. I have to double check this. I heard that KSW might be on there too, which is interesting. But yeah, well, then that's awesome. That's a great card, actually. I filled the fries in the main event. But no, to me, it's like it has to be more of the same thing. Like, I don't know. It's great that they have other sports, and if you're a fan of all sports, that's great. But to me, it's a tough sell with Fight Pass. All the stuff on there is pretty much fight related. So you're going to have people that are going to, and there's the archive content too, which is great if you want to go do tape study or whatever. That's a selling point, but there's none of that on this app. So to me, it's a tough sell with already having to pay for everything else for the UFC and pay-per-views and all that. It's tough. So I'd have to reconsider it. Maybe I'll, use another credit card and see if I can get another free month or something. We'll see.
Well, guys, a tough sell for you shouldn't be FightfulMMA.com. It is free. Get all your news there. James talks to dozens of fighters a month. He has some great stuff up there. He does the interviews. We write up stories. We run them on YouTube. We run them on FightfulMMA.com. Beautiful stuff. Let the people know about us, most importantly. We are an independent wrestling, MMA, and boxing website. We cover a lot of boxing. If you all haven't checked that out, we did a Triple G Canelo post show recently. Carlos Toro is one of the best emerging boxing writers in the world, period. If you're trying to keep up with the world of boxing and you can't do it very well, he does a newsletter every other week that is good for hardcore fans or casual fans. It is a great primer. I love it. I look forward to editing that thing every other week. So check that out as well. We have the FightfulBoxing.com domain as well. But James, tell them where they can follow you on social media.
Easiest way, at Lynch on Sports, Twitter, Instagram, whatever you name it. We got a lot of cool interviews coming up here on Fightful. UFC Moncton, we're already covering that card top to bottom. We got both fighters in the main event, Volkan Ozdemir, Anthony Smith. Those are going to be up on Fightful. Check those out. We also got Arjun Bowler, Sarah Morris, Andre Sukumta, Nasrat Hakparat. Lots of interviews coming your way. And then, of course, UFC 229. We have a bunch as well coming up this week. We'll talk about all that on the Fightful MMA podcast this Tuesday, which you guys can watch at 2 p.m. Eastern time. But, lots of content. Covering everything, man. We got to get it all. So
if you all want to stream the Ryzen show in just moments, you can buy that on Fightful.com. We have the full card up there. We will have results after the show. We cover PFL. We got live results of that coming up this week. And don't forget, you guys, UFC 229, McGregor, Habib. We're going to break it down. We're going to make predictions. I love it, breaking down a big, big fight. And we have some good cards coming throughout the end of the year. As I mentioned, some freak show fights, some good fights. It's going to be a good time. Follow me at Sean Ross Sapp. Follow us at Fightful MMA and Fightful Online. Most importantly, clickety-clack on Fightful.com. Until next time, we're out.